I think it's interesting to think about our long relationship with coal. Electricity is only a little more than 100 years old, but human beings have been burning coal for 1,000 years, 1,500 years, and for the first 800 or 900 years of that time period, we burned it for heat. We just turned coal into heat, treated it as if it were firewood. And then in 1764, James Watt, who actually looks a lot like Amory Lovins, if you see a picture of James Watt, he invented the first efficient steam engine. It was a steam engine that it could actually do work. And this was a new idea that you could take coal and not use it for heat, but you could use it for work. You could turn coal into motion. You could build this thing called a heat engine. And the first use of Watt's heat engine was to pump water out of the British coal mines. They had gone so deep into the groundwater, they were being flooded. And Watt's steam engine was used to dewater the coal mines. That enabled you to get more coal out. And then for the next 130 years, we had this interesting phenomenon where coal and steam and iron learned to feed on each other. And that process of these things feeding on each other we call the steam age. And the best visual metaphor for it is that big locomotive coming across the plains. Chugga, chugga, chugga. That period of time was really fascinating. And it took a long time. It took about 50 years before people really understood what James Watt had done. And the first one, I think, that kind of got it was a poet, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he wrote that coal is a portable climate. It carries the heat of the tropics to Labrador, and it is the means of transporting itself wherever it is wanted. Watt whispered in the ear of mankind his secret, that a ½ ounce of coal will draw 2 tons a mile, and coal carries coal by rail and by boat to make Canada as warm as Calcutta, and with its comfort brings industrial power. So we've had a long relationship with this fuel. 5 or 6 years ago, it looked like the world was sort of turning its back on coal, or coal production was sort of plateauing, and Amory was even arguing that we were going to turn away from king coal and go on our merry way with natural gas and renewables and efficiency and nuclear. And then we've had this phenomenal thing happen. The Chinese have doubled their coal burn. We use 1 billion tons here in the US each year. They've gone from 1 billion to 2 billion in a 6-year period. So now if you're concerned about climate change, all the climatologists say this is the climate is a coal dilemma. And so the dilemma is, can you either not burn this fuel, not use it at all, turn your back on it, and generate electricity with other means and sources? And can you do that globally? Or if you're going to continue using coal, can you burn it in a way where we're not just capturing SOx and NOx, these criteria pollutants that are measured in grams per megawatt hour, but in a way where we're capturing CO2, which is measured in tons per megawatt hour. Right now in Colorado, when you buy $100 of electricity, you're also buying or getting bundled with it 1,500 pounds of carbon dioxide. And that's the coal dilemma. And Bob Williams is one of the experts on this idea of maybe we can take the carbon out of the coal and store it underground, put the genie back in the bottle.
So yeah, three and 4 years ago, and 5 years ago, people were talking about the importance of capturing CO2 and putting it underground. And here we are 5 years later with much more of a sense of urgency, and people are still talking about it, but it is not happening on a large scale. Bob, what will it take, and is this the answer, for at least for to tide us over until what Jim was laying out can come to pass?
To respond to your second question first, I think there's a general consensus in the community that there is no future for coal in a world that seeks deep reductions in greenhouse gas emissions unless CO2 capture and storage works at gigascale. By what I mean by gigascale is storing billions of tons of CO2 per year underground. And to give you an idea of the scale, you might think about at the present time our total global CO2 emissions are 25, 26 gigatons of CO2 per year. And by mid-century, we should be thinking of, if we're going to have coal in the world, we should be thinking of putting underground 7 to 10 gigatons of CO2 per year. Now, having said that, it's also very important to recognize that the likelihood of getting global consensus on carbon mitigation policy generally, especially in coal-intensive economies, would be greatly enhanced if carbon capture and storage worked at gigascale. And to give you a sense of that, there was a very important study that the International Energy Agency did in support of the G8 Plan of Action back in 2006. This is called Energy Technology Perspectives 2006. And they did a very important calculation in there and showed that in the case of China, if you take carbon capture and storage off the table as an option for carbon mitigation, China's marginal cost of meeting its likely obligations for climate change mitigation in mid-century would be something like 60% higher than it would be if you had carbon capture and storage as a major option. Now, to get to your first part of your question here, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out with a special report on CO2 capture and storage in 2005, and I was a lead author of that. One of the lead authors of that particular report had a high degree of confidence that there is at least 2,000 gigatons of secure CO2 storage capacity worldwide, and in a variety of geological formations. But if we're going to be able to exploit that, we have to rely not just on the theoretical calculations that have been done, but we need to carry out what I call mega-scale CO2 storage demonstration projects in a wide variety of geological formations. And we need to do that in the next decade. And we need something like 10 or 12 of these projects worldwide. We already have 4 going on worldwide, mega-scale, which means storing at least 1 million tons of CO2 per year in underground formations of one kind or another, and we need at least 10 or 12 others in a wide variety of formations in order to give a wide range of stakeholders a high degree of confidence that this is going to work. And in addition to that, we also have to come up and develop policy instruments that can make CO2 capture and storage a routine commercial activity after we get done with these mega-scale CO2 storage projects. And it's very important to put this in the context of an overall carbon mitigation policy. Jim has already alluded to the fact that a major part of his strategic plan for his company is to emphasize end-use efficiency, to cut down on demand. And if you cut down on demand, there's not going to be a lot of new coal-fired power plant construction in this country, except to the extent of replacing old plants. Now, old plants should nominally be retired after they're 30 or 40 years old, but the propensity in the industry is to try to find ways to run these plants for decades more, up to 60 or 70 years. And those plants produce very cheap electricity. And it's of the order of 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour is the cost of electricity for those. And if you have to replace those old dirty plants with a carbon capture and storage plant, you increase the electricity from that particular plant by a factor of 3.5 to 4. That makes this a very daunting challenge. And if you look at what the carbon price is associated in order to induce that, it's like $90 a ton, $80 to $90 a ton of CO2. To put that price into perspective, that's like 80 to 90 cents a gallon gasoline tax. You know, if we had such a high carbon price. And I think that it's going to be very difficult to quickly get high carbon prices into place of that nature. And we need to think of regulatory strategies to overcome that problem instead. And I'll come back a little bit later and discuss one of those options.